Can cell phones be dangerous? Now, this is a major debate in medicine right now. Some experts, they're convinced there is no public health risks, but others claim that cell phones are the tobacco and asbestos of our future. So who's right? What's fact and what's fiction? I'm back with Dr. Sanjay Gupta, who has gone inside the labs. He's studied the research, and he's got his take, a very even take, on the cell phone industry. So what have you learned? Is it really dangerous, or
I think both groups that you just mentioned, the people who say it's absolutely safe and the people who say that it's absolutely dangerous, they don't know. And that's the important point here. People don't realize, Mehmet, that cell phones have only been widely used in this country really since the mid-90s, 96 or so. It usually takes about 30 years to find these things out. You need 30 years of data to know for sure one way or the other. There was a study that came out. It's called the Interphone Study, big multinational study. And they did find the people who use their cell phones the most, the heaviest cell phone users, did have a slight increase in a particular type of brain tumor after 10 years. Now, again, they want more studies to prove that and see it in wider groups of people, but we just don't know yet, I think.
So I'm going to give you a statement about cell phones. Okay. I want everyone in their mind to think about whether they think this is a fact or fiction. And we're going to walk you through what I think is some of the basic tenets that everyone ought to understand about their cell phone. So the first question, tell us if it's fact or fiction. Cell phones emit an amount of radiation that is regulated by the government. Sanjay, fact or fiction?
This is fact.
All right. So, what do we know about cell phone radiation?
Well, there is a certain amount that they say this is the safe amount of radiation that can be transmitted by cell phone. That is a regulated amount, and it's pretty wide standard. Two things I want to point out then. This is part of the digging again. One is they were looking at people who use their cell phones once a week for 6 months. I don't know about you, but I use my phone a little bit more than that. Yes. So obviously it wasn't a good standard for people who are more regular cell phone users. Two is that it was in adults. And, you know, again, back in the mid-90s, kids, you know, you wouldn't dream of giving a kid a cell phone. Now, oftentimes they do. But there's a difference between kids' skulls and adult skulls. Adult skulls are just going to be thicker. And this is more than an anatomical difference. Take a look. I mean, the amount of radiation that will be absorbed by a child, the picture's worth 1,000 words. It is more. And also these
pictures, by the way, just to be clear, these are images of what a cell phone would do, this radiation going through the skull. So you see in a 5-year-old child, it's pretty much getting most of the way through the head.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. So again, this wasn't tested in children. And children would not only have more absorption, but most likely they're going to use their phones for a much longer time than you or I did.
For sure. All right, this is for all of you, see how alert you all are. In your cell phone's instructions, to see if you read them, there's a warning to keep the phone a certain distance from your body. Sanjay, fact or fiction?
It's a fact.
Okay, Sanjay, walk us through this. I did not realize this until you brought this to my attention.
Yeah, so if you read those instructions, which again, hardly anybody does, but it does tell you specifically to keep your cell phone a certain distance away from your body. And what is interesting is they have a very specified distance in many of these things. For example, with BlackBerry, it ends up being about 3/4 of an inch. They say, don't hold your phone close to your body. And I don't know about you, but again, you know, who holds their phone like this when they talk? I mean, usually you got it pushed up against your...
You have to hold it like this.
Right. I mean...
All right. The last question. Cell phones emit the same kind of radiation as X-ray machines. Sanjay, fact or fiction?
That's fiction. So this is interesting. There's ionizing and there's non-ionizing radiation. We all know ionizing radiation, the stuff of the X-rays, for example, too much of that can be a bad thing. Yeah. Non-ionizing radiation is a sort of like a microwave oven. Now, you don't necessarily think you want a microwave oven next to your head as much as a lot of people carry their cell phones, but that's the type of radiation that's coming out of there. Again, it's different, but we're exposing ourselves to so much of it for so long, and that's the concern. Could that accumulate in terms of problems over the years?
So let's walk through the bottom line as I see it, and Sanjay, I'd love to get your takes on this. We don't have long-term data on the health implications. There are flaws in many of the studies that have been done, and they haven't been around long enough to tell even if we had the best data on it. So it seems to me there's some room for concern. I'd love you just to give us some practical advice as a dad, as a husband, as a guy who gives us a lot of valuable tools for all of us to use. What should we do?
Well, first of all, you don't need to lose your cell phone. I mean, I in fact, have 2 cell phones, but there are things that you can do without turning your life on your head. For example, I use my cell phone, but I always use a wired earpiece. That's something that I use. It keeps the phone away from my brain, and you know, and also safer, I think, if you're doing something like driving. I also, you know, I think about the idea of not getting my kids' cell phones for that same reason that we were talking about. If they're going to be accumulating this amount of radiation exposure from a young age onward, I mean, they're asking for it. I'm trying to hang tough on that sort of thing. And finally, here's a tip that I really found interesting, is that if you're having a really hard time hearing on your phone, it's probably emitting more radiation at that time to try and establish a signal with the cell tower.
Right.
At those times, if you're having a hard time hearing, that's the best time to basically say, look, we'll do this call at another time, because that's probably the most dangerous or possibly dangerous in terms of radiation emission.
Yeah, I'm carrying it in my back pocket from now on.
There you go.
They have some muscles with fat back there to protect me.